You're on air.
All right, good evening. Welcome, everyone. This is wonderful to see people here, live, in person, instead of looking out at a bunch of empty chairs. So, good evening, everyone at home. Welcome to the December 9th, 2025 meeting of the Growth Planning Committee, and we will start off, as always, with introductions of members.
Tom Smith.
Jane Evelyn.
Paul Hogan.
Dan Saunders.
Liz Johnson. Anne Marie Martin.
Mary Beth Gilbert, Select Board.
Galen Webley, support staff.
Okay. And then we have a couple of guests in the audience, so I'll ask you, you're free to speak. We kind of run an open thing here, but just please step up to the mic so everybody at home can hear you as well. Okay? On today, we actually have Representative Gear here to talk to us about some the legislative changes that have occurred that can have an impact on our comprehensive plan and so forth in the town. So thank you very much for coming here and talking to us live. I'm sure members will have plenty of discussions or questions. It'll be a good, respectful conversation and hopefully get everything out in the open and discuss where we head. So I will start off if anyone else has anything to say, Galen, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to thank the representative for taking the time out of her busy schedule to be here tonight. It's something that I know the Growth Planning Committee has expressed a lot of information and just a lot of questions about what's happening in the pipeline. And given my former role as a legislative staffer in Pennsylvania, I always appreciate when state representatives take the time to really listen to the constituents and to understand what their questions and feedback might be regarding pending legislation. It's part of the public policy process. So we always appreciate having that constructive dialogue with you and appreciate any insight you can offer us about, especially LD 1829 is their main concern. I would say also the Fix-It bill. You know, there's a lot of questions about where that's at in the process. And then certainly 1921 and 1926 are currently pending legislation. I think that's in front of your committee. If you could offer us some insight on where those are at in the process as well, that'd be helpful.
Absolutely. It's working?
I thought that was on.
There we go. Now is it on? How's that? Better.
Perfect.
Great to see everyone, and it is great to be here with you tonight. I'm really happy to have the opportunity, and Galen has been reaching out, which is great, and I just want to make sure that everyone's aware I'm always available. You know, just my cell phone number is on my webpage and on my email, so feel free to reach out anytime with questions. And my name is Tracy Gear. I'm the state rep for District 134, which includes all of Kennebunkport and then coastal Kennebunk and coastal Biddeford in my third term. And also co-chair the Housing and Economic Development Committee, and really started out my legislative career in working on housing issues. If you all remember back in 2018 when we really started to study the challenges we were facing, you know, in our town with housing, that was really one of my main motivations in running, so that we could start to address that in more comprehensive ways, working together. So that's been really something I've been focused on a lot. So in the work that we've been doing on the committee, the Housing and Economic Development Committee, with the most recent bill that we passed that you all had looked at, 1829, and the goal of a lot of the work that we're doing is to recognize that there are opportunities to allow housing in places where there are designated growth areas and where existing infrastructure exists, and to help communities do that. And so that's the purpose of that particular law. And you know, if you guys have already walked through, I'm going to just pause, because if you already walked through the bill with SMPDC, was that a couple weeks ago. That's a great presentation. They do a great job of really translating things. And maybe if I just pause and say answer questions might be the way to go with that one. Would that be a good way to handle it, Galen? Or
Yeah.
I think first one would be, because we're, you know, we read through the bill. We've had, as we said, the great presentation by Southern Maine Planning and Development. And then we've been listening and seeing and reading what other towns have been doing to counter what they perceive as maybe some overreach into their ordinances and how they perceive themselves as growing as a town and what they think is important. And so we've been reading through how other towns are starting to address this and put in either changes to their comprehensive plan or, potential changes to their own ordinances before the bill takes effect, I think in July of '27. But we've also heard that there's this, what Galen referenced to, a fix-it bill. And so we've been trying to understand, and we haven't been able to get any insight from any of our MMA or Southern Maine Planning and Development about what is actually going to be addressed in the fix-it bill for 1829. If you have, if you could give us some insight in terms of what's coming in front of the Housing Committee, we've heard it's coming in for this January session. So if you could enlighten us on that, that would be extremely helpful to us.
And I would be happy to, if I had seen the bill yet. So I have not seen the bill that will address some of the issues that have been raised. We will be hearing that bill in my committee. So as that bill comes forward, we'll be able to work together in that on the committee with any changes that folks are looking to make. So at this point, we just simply don't have the bill in hand. So it's hard for me to speak to it. I know that Galen had mentioned the issue about Goose Rocks specifically, I think, and the density in the floodplain, which I think is a very important issue to address. And I think that will be part of the conversation. So I can't speak to what's in the bill, but the way it works in the legislature is that if a bill is presented and it's addressing a set of topics, we can always bring in additional things that are related, make amendments to the bill as needed. So definitely want to be looking at that issue. And I would be, again, wanting to follow. I was trying to get some more information for Galen, and I hadn't been able to do that, hadn't heard back yet. But it would be really interesting to me. He was very helpful in explaining to me the challenge that we face. The idea of 1829 is, of course, to always have shoreline zoning not change. So shoreline zoning applies there. And then it's my understanding that with changes in the floodplain and with the additional coastal flooding that we've been experiencing, we need to be really careful about, additional development there. And so that will be, definitely we bring into committee experts who can make sure that we're clearly understanding, for example, where the shoreline zoning applies and if there is a risk of it not applying somewhere where it should be, and how that would also then potentially relate to a more broadly defined floodplain based on the updated information we're getting about coastal flooding. So that will definitely be part of the conversation. I would be looking for input, on definitely how we want to be working that and thinking about that in committee. So.
Okay, that'd be great. And so I think you'll probably hear from the committee and maybe from some of the residents on some of the concerns of, from 1829, from what we've interpreted as, and you can help us if you think we're interpreting it wrong. But, just going back to that point, because we have heard about the fix-it bill, and I don't want to harp on it, but has there been certain categories? We don't know. What we're struggling with is we don't know if the fix-it is little tiny things or major things that are going to change the look and feel of the bill. So can you at least, is there categories that have come forward to your committee and you can categorize them for us, or?
Again, I haven't seen the language in the bill. As soon as I get that language, I can definitely reach out, but I can't speak to that. I think maybe a different approach could be ask your questions and we can see, again, this is an ongoing process. We go back into session on January 7th. And then during the month of January is when we'll be scheduling the public hearings for all of the bills that we have before us, both the carryover bills and then new bills like this one. So that will be, public hearing. You'll be able to see and listen in on the discussion. As a committee, we're very proactive in making sure, especially when we're dealing with housing, that we get all of the issues out on the table for discussion as we're deliberating, because we've got to make sure to consider everything and move the legislation forward in ways that's going to work. So,
I would say obviously one of the things about it is one size fits all.
Mike.
Right across the.
Make sure you
Sorry,
close the microphone.
Stepped away. So, it's sort of the one size fits all. And my concern, certainly being a waterfront community, the coastal community, a vacation home community, one where 50% of the residents here aren't owned by people who live here year-round, that the LD 1829, it'll drive really just opportunities for more million-dollar housing that's not going to do anything to support and provide housing for the people that work in our town. I mean, it's...
So if I just restate your question, you're concerned that there will be development happening that will be high-end and not available.
Absolutely.
And actually, 1829 is specifically structured to support housing that is affordable to people, regular folks, because the density bonuses, so if we were to work through the different things, the density allowances in the growth area and where there's water and sewer are designed to support the number of units of housing that would be required to bring down the cost of each unit so that people would be able to afford to live there.
Yep.
So that's the way that all of these bills work, is to say in the area that you've designated for growth and where you have invested, and we have had in a big way as a community in our infrastructure, where that exists, where you increase the number of units that are allowed and decrease the lot sizes, then you can start to see forms of housing that you can either intentionally, like with our Housing Trust, others, and other organizations, you can intentionally create housing that then is affordable to regular folks. And that is actually the whole intention behind the bill.
So I would say that that's a supply-demand principle that you're speaking about. And that supply-demand principle would be true in an environment where you had land values and more of an infinite amount of land. But, I mean, to Dan's point, and what we've been struggling with is, I've used this before, you are what you are. I'm 5'2". I could be an Olympic speed skater, but I'm not going to be a Vogue model. So, we are a community town with high-end real estate, and that's what we see. And we also are a flashpoint for developers for high-end. So, for example, what we're concerned about in the town, because we don't have a historical district. So when we look at this, some of the things about, when we see our lovely chart that SMP did, and they said, look, this is what a lot in your downtown could turn into. Our concern is that we're going to start losing some of our character of our town because we're not squashed in, and that's what we need to understand. Do we need to create a historical district so that we can, counter some of the look and feel that could potentially happen? Because I get your point, but I don't think it is a truth for our town. I believe a lot will be sold in our port, and high-end developer will come in and take a house down and put in 4 very expensive condos that then people can walk to the ocean, and that will be high demand. We already see it happening now. So I can see how that would happen for other towns, but we are what we are. And I think, Dan was articulating part of the conversations that this committee's had, and some of the residents that have had with us, some of the board members, just about how this is going to look and feel, and it may not result with what the bill's intent is, and that's what we're struggling with.
I hear what you're saying. I think that the intention about having a growth area and designating that growth area, and I actually went through, there was another attached report here. I noticed that we have not issued building permits. We're issuing them more in the rural area, especially in recent years. And I think there are similarly concerns that when we look at housing development and we look at I know that in our town we've had many conversations about how do we provide housing for firefighters, for teachers, for folks that work in our restaurants and in our tourism industry that are super important. And the only way that we are going to tackle that as a community is to think about how to create housing that would be, based on the cost of it, affordable either as for rent or for ownership to those folks. So this bill is designed to provide the tools for that. To your point, there's also then the luxury end or the high end of the market. I know that we have been very proactive, and I always congratulate our community that we were very we saw very early on the potential impact of Airbnbs and that sort of thing. So we created an ordinance that limited that. And I think that is the other piece of that is if you're assuming that ordinance is going to continue, then that limits the use of luxury property for Airbnb, which is also driving a lot of development, not just here, but, all up and down the coast. So we're not alone in sort of the, the second home ownership and the challenges that we face. We have a free market in this country, and we have private property rights. So we cannot get rid of that and say you can't build here a certain kind of unit. Luxury and high-end is by definition high price and has a certain market that it's looking to attract. Is that market luxury condos? Maybe, maybe not. If we are strategic as a community, and this is what I hope that we will engage in moving forward, is more of the conversations that we have started to have around how do we work together to create housing that is affordable to downsizing seniors, to seniors who want to live in a smaller place closer into town, to young families, to teachers, to firefighters, to people that provide services to us in our community. And that is our responsibility, and I think that rather we can focus on that piece of it as well, which is how do we use this as a tool to do that. So,
Which, I'll argue that's what this committee's been doing for the last 15 years that I've been on it, or actually 20 years, but the last 15 years really focused on that. I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate that's the feeling behind this, but when I read this, that's not what it tells me. So I would really challenge the legislature.
I guess I'm
to
just
go back and look at
questioning
that.
what in it is not allowing you to do that better.
Yeah, all the additional housing to be built on a 5,000 square foot lot does not have to be affordable.
But it can be.
It can be, but it won't be
Sure.
in this town.
No, it won't, because so you do the math. Math is unbinding and relentless. So you do the math on a property that we have here, a lot size. We've already run through calculations for some of the parcels here in land in terms of what it would take and look at for affordability. If the town or somebody does not give the land, it is against the laws of math to build affordable housing in this town, what the land price is. So if we start from that known truth, if this bill said, so if you said, okay, what do you need from us? Like, if your goal, if we're having a conversation on condos and our downtown look and feel is gonna change from Lord mansions to little tiny condo apartments, 14 on a lot that had one house. And then, so we don't agree with that premise and we think it's gonna do damage to our town. The second part of that is you're saying, okay, this bill is gonna do something for bringing in affordable housing. And whilst to Dan's point, we all believe that that is something that, we would like to continue to work for. We have made improvement, and we had the Heritage Trust in here for a while, and now we had, what's the other homes? Habitat in here. But again, it's really hard to do that in our town. And so you would say, well, what in this bill would have to change? And we would say, anytime you start to go down to this 4,000 or 5,000 square foot lot, it has to be affordable housing. And that's where supply and demand's not going to bring affordability in here. It's just going to give us a lot more. And so if you could say 1829, anytime you can put 4 units on, they all have to be affordable. And then you've got a bill that's going to bring affordability to Kennebunkport, but it won't unless probably somebody gives some land away to them, because no developer's going to come in and be able to do that unless something else happens within the housing market. But that's, and so then you say, what else have you guys been struggling with? And part of what we've been struggling with is what this explosion of growth can do to our town. For example, we've got this sewer study, wastewater treatment plant study. Our growth permits and everything have been articulated to go forward on what is a reasonable amount of growth so that we can sustain it. Our taxes have been historically in a very nice spot. We'd like to keep them that way for affordability of our current workforce in our town. And so you look at that and say, okay, where do you go from there? And you have to just sort of stop on the growth side, because if you say we are going to allow 4 houses where 1 house was, and we're going to take away your ability to monitor that growth and the growth permits, and you yank them from us, then we can have an explosion. And then it pulls in our wastewater treatment plant, it pulls in how many police officers we have to hire, it pulls in maintenance workers. It takes our town on a growth trajectory that we haven't planned for. And in that, the state is not coming back to us saying, hey, if we're gonna up the ante and pulling your wastewater treatment plant by 3 years, we're gonna give you a bond or a bond rate of XYZ to alleviate the stress. And we don't see this in the bill, and I'm talking way too much, so I'm gonna let the other committee members talk.
Was there a question there that you wanted to ask?
It's more of a, we are sharing with you the dialogue that this committee has had over the last few months as we've been digesting 1829 and our twice-a-month meeting. And these are the questions. And if you're telling us that's what the bill is going to do, that is a summary of a feedback, which the committee members can agree or disagree with, of, I believe, what our conversations have been over the last 3 or 4 months. And it's feedback to you to say, it's not going to work here from what you're telling us, and we'd like you to reconsider some things and have that discussion with you. So I don't know if other members
So I
have
just
any
wanted
comments.
to just have a quick response, because
Sure.
we go back to 2003 and go back to the efforts that we're making statewide on the housing issue. One thing is to keep in mind that the same parameters apply. So water and sewer capacity, setbacks, dimensional requirements, except where we've changed them in shoreland zoning, all of those elements continue to be part of what is to be considered. So, for example, if development is being proposed now or then, or in the future, the sewer and water capacity is still a gating factor. That doesn't change. So I just want to make sure that you're clear on that. This doesn't nullify water and sewer capacity as a deciding factor in allowing development. Just wanted to respond to that, because I want to make sure we're clear. This doesn't say toss out the water and sewer capacity issue, that still
So
applies.
theoretically, if our sewer plant was at capacity, then we could say, sorry, no one else can go on it.
Correct.
You'd have to provide some other way of handling the.
And if as a
the waste.
strategy, you wanted to say, we want to increase the capacity to serve this neighborhood where we want to build, affordable and attainable housing for folks, then you can do so. So that's still there, and again, the setback still applies. And the shoreline zoning obviously will always apply.
I think on both LD 2003 and 1829, the key parts have been the ability that are concerning, or the ability to just build housing. Because I know that was part of it, right? If you build housing, sooner or later it'll trickle down, and we'll have affordable housing as well someplace, right?
That is not the way that it occurs, but
Well, that's the way
in my
it
experience.
is, right? There's opportunity to build additional housing that's not affordable, that's,
Supply and
is
demand.
exceeding the zoning that the town has. So the state's changing the zoning to allow additional development of housing that does not have to be affordable, that we have to comply with.
If I can
Both
speak,
LD 2003 and
Okay, sorry.
1829.
if I can speak to the
Sure.
issue about affordable and attainable housing.
Sure.
There is nowhere in Maine, including in Caribou, I was just with the planner from Caribou yesterday, where you can allow housing to be built naturally, and the result will be affordable, technically affordable housing for people with low incomes, or even at this point, middle income, what we call missing middle or attainable housing. That has to be an intentional strategy of any municipality in order for that to happen, simply for the reasons that Mary Beth just described, because the numbers for a project to, what they say in the industry, pencil out, the reason why we get luxury development is that to make the numbers pencil out in terms of land cost and the costs of the project, is that the result is that then you need to be able to sell it for, I think what was I heard the median sales price for a home in Kennebunkport is 1.3 at the moment. So 1.3 million. So one of the reasons we continue to get luxury development is that developers know that they can make money on those projects. They pencil out, they can get them financed. Nowhere in Maine, maybe in the Allagash, I don't know. There's nowhere in Maine. I asked the guy from Caribou, I said, if you were to build a single-family home, Cape, on a small lot, would that be affordable in Caribou? He said, no. It can't, and it's not our fault. We've all been working on this. You've all been working on this. We've been working on this as a community. That is a cause. It's being caused by the interest rates, by the cost of materials, the 5 elements that drive housing costs: land, soft costs, which is all of the permitting and the legal fees and the engineering and the architecture, labor, materials, and what am I of course I forget the 5th one. But all of those elements.
Yeah.
So it's labor, materials, hard costs, soft costs, and the land.
And regulations, but, you know.
And that's the soft cost, which is complying with regulations and complying with local zoning requirements. The things that are driving luxury development here in Bar Harbor, in Camden, every coastal community faces these same challenges. And the projects that pencil are the projects you can sell for those high luxury amounts. Why aren't we seeing, to your point, Mary Beth, we could theoretically be seeing middle income and affordable housing now, but we don't, because on the lots of the sizes that they are, and with all those costs, there's no developer that will be able to build something that's affordable or attainable to a regular folks. I remember when I first started in this gig, several years ago, first thing I did was go and talk with a bunch of developers, builders that I knew in Saco and Biddeford. Why aren't you building housing? Well, we've always built starter homes and they don't pencil, so we're doing something else. We're going and we're contracting with all the luxury builders in the area. We've all seen these market dynamics happen. The only way that we, in our community and in every community, is going to change that, is to change the decision-making and our intentionality about where the housing that we need for people who live here, people we want to work here, our kids that we want to have come back to town and be able to afford a place to live. The only way we're going to do that is by making decisions that leverage the tools that we're making available in 1829 and other laws. Because if you took a look at our growth area and looked at to the point of where we've had many conversations over the years. We've had conversations about the parcel. We've had conversations about building senior housing. I've been busy. I haven't looked in over the last couple of months of, are there any plans to do that? But that idea of being intentional, using the housing trust, using the entities that we've been working with to actually put those things on the table. I guarantee you, if you're going to look at what those would look like, they would be denser developments. They would be townhouses. They would be triple deckers. The forms that we've all seen around New England over the years that do have more dwelling units on smaller pieces of land. Mary Beth, to your point, I spent 30 years in business. I am a numbers person. We've all been looking at these numbers for years now on how do you make these pieces work. Where can you take costs out? You can take costs out in soft costs. You can take costs out of the regulatory environment. With the housing trust, we've taken some of the cost of land out, right? We've removed that to try to get the cost down. But still, the only way to actually create more housing like that is to just increase the density and make those, and decide very intentionally where you want to put that housing. Go and talk with the developers, bring in Avesta. I know we've had those folks in over the years in various conversations to say, what do we want that to look like and to feel like, and to whose needs do we want to be able to accommodate in our town? I rattled off some of the folks that I talk with as my constituents every day. Seniors who want to downsize, folks that we would love to be able to live here and work here in our town, in our public safety services, in our restaurants and all of our hotels and our tourism industry that really need this and are really, is really such a key element of long-term viability of our town as the place where we all live and love. And that is absolutely, I think if we spend some more time, and I don't want to take up, I don't know what you guys are thinking of for tonight, but we could have a workshop, and I am happy to come and share with you what other communities are doing, how they're working through these challenges. this is what I spend all my time doing. I look at what other states are doing. We look at, we've done a lot of work looking at various kinds of communities around Maine. Again, many of which are very similar to us. We're not a unicorn. There are other coastal communities that are sharing many of the same challenges. If you look at Bar Harbor, their second home ownership rate is 62%. You know, they are real, and they don't have workers. They have the same challenges that we do. They've tried a housing trust. They've got some of the same tools. So I guess I'm just saying this to say, I understand that there's some tension here. I'm not trying to gloss that over. Anytime we can sit down, happy to workshop it and work it through and share some of the learnings that because I'm not doing this out of the blue. I mean, this is something that we've spent a lot of time thinking through how to make work.
So if we're thinking about 1829, and again, I don't want to talk over any of the committee members, so please jump in if you want to speak before I speak again. Okay. So if we're talking about 1829, and us as a committee have been trying to figure out our go-forward path. And like we referred to before, we see some articles from other towns. They're changing their comp plan, they're reducing their growth area, they're putting in historical districts, they're putting in some things to try to keep the look and feel of their towns as they know it, as they want it. I guess I should say it that way. So we too can start entertaining those things, and we've been trying to understand where the legislature is. We'll wait and hear from you, and maybe you can come back and help us understand when you see the fix-it, you know, and understand what that could do for us or whatever, and what our actions might be from that. But from our conversations right now, we'll talk as a committee, but and as a community, but I still don't see, if the legislation stays the way it is, I don't see the affordability part being this as a help for affordability in our town. I see it as a advantageous, transformational thing that could happen to some of our properties where we, as you pointed out, do not have permits for growth because we don't have a lot of land, but I could see a lot of tear downs happening like we have at the beach. People can start coming in here and tearing down, take down one house, put up four. There's, as you said, that will pencil out for a developer very quickly. And that's what I think the majority of our group here has been concerned about. So, I'm struggling to say, okay, if the bill is going forward as is, and then the fix-it may not approach that. Like if you came back and said, oh, part of the fix-it is you can only do these density improvements if it's affordable housing, then that helps us. Then we're like, okay, that will change the dynamics of what would happen in our town. But if that's not the case, and it's an open market, free market for this density, then I believe us as a committee have to go and put some changes in place and bring them up to the select board and try to either change our comp plan or change our ordinance or change both to try to make sure that we maintain a feel of that Kennebunkport stays Kennebunkport in a feel approach. I don't know, other committee members that haven't spoken, if you want to say anything or.
Well, I see a problem with the growth area as it is in Kennebunkport and increasing the density in our growth area, which is really the downtown area, which is what people come to Kennebunkport for. They like the small town sort of atmosphere of downtown Kennebunkport. So, in terms of, we have a transition area, and actually a lot of the growth that's happened recently has been in more of the transition or rural area of town, the new homes, the new development. So transition to me means change. Maybe we should be changing our growth area, and even though there are areas not currently supplied by sewer, which is sort of part of the definition, maybe we need to expand our sewer to what is now considered transition area. But is the state going to help us? As Mary Beth had indicated previously, are they going to help us with the costs that we might have in order to be able to do this sort of thing?
I would say two things. One thing is, absolutely, every community in Maine always has the option to revisit their comprehensive plan and their growth area. And I personally believe that this is something that is actually really important, and this presents an opportunity to do. Because the growth area, by definition, right, is the area where you intend growth to occur. And I would venture to say that the current definition, the current map of the growth area in Kennebunkport isn't really that, because we don't really intend growth to happen in, I'll use that, I don't mean this in a negative way, but the big blob that is the growth area, right? There's sort of a big area around that extends pretty far out that is growth area. I think this bill, and generally as we think about this moving forward, it is an opportunity to say very intentionally, where do we envision growth to happen? Are there historic resources we want to preserve and should designate as such? I think that's absolutely a key. And the other key thing that's really a huge factor for us is the shoreline zoning. Because as we know, the flooding that we've seen is going to really, you know, kind of prevent a lot of the sort of rampant kind of stuff that Mary Beth, you're alluding to, from happening in the Dock Square area, because it's simply, you know, there's going to be an issue around the flooding, and again, that's, I have that on my list to make sure we're covering. So that's a point well taken. I do think that, so that's one point that I would say in response. I will say that the other piece is thinking then strategically, and again, I think every community in Maine needs to be doing this. I know we've been thinking a lot about where do we want to invest in infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, right? Because it's an expensive thing to do. And if in that reconsideration of looking at intentional growth, it makes sense to say, where do we want to invest in expanding or changing what areas are reached by water and sewer? And do we prioritize those areas for growth as opposed to areas, you know, that might be more sprawl-like development out in the more rural and/or, you know, transitional areas? I think that's a really important conversation. I know that many constituents that I speak with are very conservation-minded, and I think that finding the balance between housing and conservation not being at war, but really looking at how do we preserve our environment and all the great work that the Conservation Trust is doing, where we've got, I think now 30% of our land conserved. How do we focus the growth in a way that's going to be preserving the historic nature of our town center, and then also, you know, then making sure we're maximizing the capacity utilization of these very important infrastructure investments that we all as taxpayers make in our town. And I think that's something that we haven't really done anywhere in Maine, again, because our laws don't require it. And if you go to Michigan, I've been talking a lot with folks in Michigan, they do a whole training around asset management that is sort of more than what we do. So I think that, yes, so I would say yes, I think this is an opportunity to make sure that the plan that we have aligns with what makes sense and what allows us to take advantage of the tools that are here in 1829 and some of the other laws to then make possible the kind of development that would be affordable and attainable to folks. And I always say this to folks, I am happy, and I said this back when we had the growth planning, I can't remember if it was one of the boards, had some of the affordable developers come in and talk about how to do that.
Yeah.
I think it might be a good time to do that again, because the idea that it's just going to happen, it's never just going to happen. We have to intentionally decide to say, are we going to make some income restricted affordable or affordable housing available, and how do we tackle this really thorny issue of middle income housing? It's an issue not just here, not just in Maine, but all over the country, and it's the same set of issues. So you know, I would, again, happy to engage in those conversations and to bring in a lot of the experts on this that can, I think, really be helpful in moving us to actually, you know, seeing some of this happen, which I think we all really want to do.
So could we, as a community, so for example, is this a realistic thing that could happen in the state of Maine with 1829? So 1829 comes in, we look at it and we say, in our town, it's not going to be affordability. So could we overlay our own ordinance that says, if you invoke this density that comes from the state of a law of 1829, it has to be affordable housing?
Or some percentage. I mean, lots of states do,
Yeah,
you know, you have to have
Can we-
30%
can-
affordable,
can the
or you
town-
contribute
Yeah.
to a
Yeah.
fund. If
Can
you
the-
don't build, like Portland.
Yeah.
If you don't build affordable on your property, so much goes into the fund. And
Yeah,
the town
I
uses
mean,
the money for,
I'd rather,
You're talking about inclusionary zoning.
yeah.
yeah, I'd rather see them build affordability than a fund, but is that something that, because I think that's where we're still struggling with the, like, my one question would be, when you guys were thinking about affordability and you look at the state of Maine, would you hone into one area instead of making this 1829 bill go across the state? Would you say, hey, this is a strategic area for the state to grow, it's centrally located, it's got a lot of land, and we're gonna go put some money and grants in there, and we're gonna build affordable housing, and that would start a growth versus the spray and pray 1829 that, you know, increased density and affordable housing shall come. So
I would just
can
want to make sure, I just want to respond to that, because again, I'm going to say it again. It's not increasing density and affordable housing will come. It's providing a tool to municipalities to use to create affordable and attainable housing. Those two things go together
So can,
I've heard everything
in,
you
in
said
a situation like
about
ours.
that is perfect, and I agree with. The find is that the words don't say that. Right, the words don't say that. What the words say is you increase in density.
Yep.
Right?
Because that's how you make things
We're gonna
affordable.
have $1 million condos, $1 million homes.
And our
that's the
property
nature.
values have just all gone up thanks to 1829.
If all this says.
Because if I go from a single-family house, I'm in a growth area, or maybe I could put a two-family, now I can do 4 units. They're of course not gonna be affordable. But I can, condo my old house, or tear down my old house, or just sell, and my property value has gone up by, we've made it more unaffordable.
4 times, yeah, 4x.
It's not gonna be 4 times.
All I'm going to
but-
say, all I can say to that, I mean, again, we're all hypothesizing here. These kinds of laws have been enacted, you don't automatically see, people build luxury homes here to have luxury homes. And so I can't respond because this is a hypothetical. I will say that, again, happy to sit down, bring experts in who can speak to this in a focused conversation. And happy to do that
To
at
that
any
one
given
point,
at any
though,
time.
to that one point, is that in the art of the possibility about, we come in with our ordinance that says if you're gonna enact 1829 density, it has to be affordable, some portion of it has to be affordable housing. Will our home rule, could we come back with home rule and say, if you're gonna do this 1829 density, you've gotta do affordable housing? Or will we be penalized by trying to overrun a state rule?
We can definitely discuss in committee again, there already is a density bonus for affordable housing in law, right? So there's the 2.5 density bonus
Right.
if you're building technically affordable housing.
Right.
That already exists. I think there is a very healthy debate, again, not just here, but around the country, about any other way to do this. And I hear what you're saying, that if you're a community and you're sort of saying, this doesn't apply to us and we want to do it in a different way. And the only assertion that I'm making back is that I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. I think we can have a conversation about both. And absolutely can discuss this in committee. Like I said, I haven't seen the other bill and will absolutely forward it as soon as I get it.
Right.
Yeah.
Tracy, I did have a follow-up question about the 2.5 density bonus for affordable housing with LD 2003, which we've implemented for the town. With these potential changes that we are looking to hopefully comply with the law, with LD 1829, changing our density down to, in the growth areas, to 4 potential dwellings on a 5,000 square foot lot, can a developer take advantage of that 2.5 times density for affordable housing if they go on a 5,000 square foot lot? So not just having 4, but 2.5 times that amount? They can.
Yes, so again, back to making the numbers work for affordable housing developers, that 2.5 density bonus applies to the allowable density on that plot.
Okay, it wasn't clear to me. I wanted to make sure I understood that correctly when I was looking at the legislation.
Again, as
Thank you.
long as you're following setbacks, the dimensional requirements, the shoreline zoning, and water and sewer capacity.
Yep.
So again, all those things still apply. That hasn't changed at all.
So, and connecting that, I guess, to LD 1926, I know we haven't discussed that bill, but that is the
Good segue.
workforce density bonus that is offered. Tracy, would you like to give a brief overview? I did give the legislation to them, but just for folks that are in the audience here and on Zoom, that they understand what the bill will do.
Yeah, so just to step back a little bit, back to the conundrum that I alluded to, right? Which is everywhere, pretty much all over the country, everyone's struggling with how do you build without subsidy. So when we talk about technically affordable, income-restricted housing, that almost, by definition today, has some form of government subsidy. So that's either federal government subsidy that's going in to support that development. We have a number of state programs that Maine Housing runs that provide subsidy to make sure that can get built. Otherwise, it does not get built. So if you're talking about a senior housing, small apartment building, where people are earning up to 60% of HUD AMI, right? I'm hoping you guys are right. There are limits there. That kind of housing, like a Vesta typically builds, that is subsidized, so that has government subsidy. The challenge that everyone's trying to tackle is if you're looking at middle income, missing middle housing for working people, families, young people, downsizing people. To get that to be built without subsidy, and how do you create the market conditions for that? That is where the segue to 1926 occurs. And so this is actually sponsored by Holly Stover in Booth Bay. So again, very similar challenge in terms of a community and what they're facing. In thinking about applying density increases for workforce housing development, depending on the income level that you're targeting. And so that's pretty much it. And we can get into, I won't get into all the specific numbers because everybody's eyes start to glaze over. But it's basically the density bonus increases based upon the level of income that you're serving. So if it's very low income housing, you get a higher density bonus. If it's lower income, middle income housing, and if it's higher income, middle income housing, you get less of a bonus. Knowing that then the price would be higher to the buyer. So you would, you're kind of scaling that. But again, I'll just put a fine point on it. Again, how you do that is through density and increasing the density. So the idea here would be that municipality, and if this were to become law, we could use this, say, in the parcel or somewhere to create an area where this intentional housing was going to be allowed and permitted. And so that is the theory and the idea behind this bill. It's supported by the Real Estate Developers Association, and the idea being that this would help developers be able to pencil out those projects and provide that housing to middle-income people. And this goes up to, as you can see on here, up to 220% of area median income. So this is, sort of it's the challenge that the coastal communities really face, which is our area median incomes are much higher than other parts of the state, but at the same time, housing is very expensive. So even people who make a really good salary still can't afford housing. So it's really saying, how do we, create housing that would be affordable? So
That was the largest number I've ever seen for workforce housing, 220%, which is a lot of folks.
And when you think about, again, all up and down the coast, Camden, Booth Bay, we all know people who have a good salary, and how do you create the housing that matches that income and matches what they could afford? This is one strategy for doing that.
Would this not override then 1829 in terms of its intent? It
So
seems like this is. It seems like this is actually has
That's
the
a
language.
tool that can help us.
This is the tool that would get the workforce. This would get us, to Paul's point, this will further increase our property values and market values, which will make affordability harder. This would help us give incentives to developers or whomever to come in and provide that workforce by giving the density for workforce-specific housing.
So we're hearing this bill, we have a work session scheduled on this on 1926 tomorrow in committee. And this is exactly, I smile a little bit because this is exactly the discussion that we're going to be having, which is how does this fit with the law as passed, and then how can we, and we're going to be hearing from more communities and how this is working, how this could work as from a developer's perspective and others. So we're going to be talking about it tomorrow. I encourage folks to tune into the work session as we hear from folks. And yeah, and so back to that idea of intentionality, being able to say intentionally, where do we want this to happen in a community? For example, if we were to do an amendment or reconsider some elements of our comprehensive plan, we could intentionally say, in this area, we're going to be targeting the building of homes for certain income levels and how we want to incentivize that. So it could be a great for that.
That's a key word, intentionality, because that we certainly could do. LD 1829, there's no intentionality there. It's a mandate that this is what we're going to have to do with our lots on our growth area, and this is the size they have to be, and then in non-growth areas, but they're served by sewer and water. There's no intentionality by the department, it's all by the state, that these are the requirements you're gonna have to meet, and it's not for affordable housing specifically. So that's really the rub. And I would challenge you, going back to your other representatives, and talk about that. If you had 1829 and 2003 were all geared towards and specific for affordable housing, there's no issue here. We'll figure it out and make it work. But it's for anything that's not like that. You got any place that's on the water or inland that's on lakes, it's going to cause, I think, a lot of problems with those towns. That's just my piece. And I think it's an important part you mentioned. I mean, the affordable, the neighborhood housing trust, right? They sent these around yesterday. I don't know how many people got these. I wanted to read a key piece here. It said, this June we broke ground on Land and Woods, a new neighborhood taking shape on Beechwood Avenue in Kennebunkport, made possible by a generous land donation from the town. The project will welcome 6 families by early 2026, each home priced at or below $378,000, right? And reserved for households earning no more than $110,240. But they're looking for donations because the cost, you give them the land, but the cost of the structures themselves are greater than $348,000.
And the state already came in too.
1829
on top of
and
that.
2003, and all these go about trying to solve the land piece and maybe the bureaucracy piece, but the piece of the cost of labor and materials and all the rest is somewhat out of the state's hands, right? It's more macroeconomics.
And I would just to emphasize Mary Beth's point there that that project was also made possible by an affordable homeownership grant from the state. So again, there is subsidy going in, and that is at the lower income restricted level to make sure that those homes are available to folks at that level.
Yeah,
so
you do it, that's wonderful.
And it would be interesting, I think a great part of a discussion would be to have, Executive Director Larissa Crockett in on that conversation, because when we talk with folks like housing trusts and affordable housing developers and managers, including, organizations like Westbrook Housing, the various housing authorities that are developing a lot of housing around the state. Again, the way they're in the numbers all the time of how to make that work, and it would be, I think, a great addition to a conversation to have Larissa there, because she knows how difficult it has been to build duplexes, and this is just duplexes, so that's 2 units on a lot, right? Even with a duplex model, it's still $378,000 per unit with subsidy in there. So again, you're even calling out, like, again, if there were 4 units there, if it was a quadplex, and the quadplexes are a very common type we're seeing all around the country in lots of rural areas as well, that can, again, all the infrastructure costs, the site work, the, most of the cost of a building is in the shell of the building, right? So you're creating 1 shell as opposed to 4. The driveway, all of that stuff that adds so much to the cost of building by, in that example, if Larissa had been able to build 4 units per, and I can't speak for her, so she's probably rolling her eyes somewhere, but if you were able to do that, then again, the cost per unit comes down.
Sure.
So, yeah, so I'm just, that's the number piece of it that I think is very relevant for our efforts with the Housing Trust and the other things that they could be doing in their next project, for example.
So with LD 1926, Representative, does that apply town-wide, or is that only in the growth areas?
So 1926, and again, we'll be discussing it tomorrow in terms of the specifics of this, but the idea is that a municipality would designate a project, a development for that, where this would apply. So it's not sort of saying, that there's a growth area application. It would be more specific than that.
But it would be town-wide, it's not designated just to the growth area like the
You could put it in.
LD 1829.
So say just to,
Yeah.
again, total hypothetical, but say we were to say, we want to do a 1926 type project in the parcel at the front end, on this end of the parcel, as an example. Like, that would be a case where you had something where you wanted this to happen. And it could be a zone, so it could be, as if you were looking at a zoning map, it could be like again, I can't remember what our zones are called, but, could be in a sub part of a zone that we were designating it for this kind of middle income housing development. And that was part of the vision. If anybody else who was with me, I think we were all together there in 2018 in the Consolidated Gym, where we had that kind of a neighborhood vision with a lot of diverse housing types that were as part of that the village parcel visioning exercise. That kind of intentionality is kind of the kind of thing I'm talking about. So if it's a town-owned parcel or a municipal, tax acquired property, that's one thing. If it's a zone where you want to say, here's where we want this to happen, then you would call it something as, you're the planner, you would have to know how you would do that, but you would map it out somehow.
Yeah, I'm familiar with like doing overlay districts and other types of mechanisms that we can do from a planning perspective. I guess my only caution to take back to the committee is by not specifying how that tool is being used. My concern with LD 1921, which is another segue point we can make at some point, is that by allowing no mechanism in place for the municipality to control where this is, there could be potentially more density in your rural and environmentally sensitive areas of town, which can then be, if the town denies that project, it can be overruled in LD 1921. So that's just something I want you to think about.
Okay, I'm just not,
Yep.
I'm sure it's me
Yep.
not understanding, not
yep.
you. So you're saying if it's more broadly designated as opposed to more specifically designated, that could be, that could open up the rural area or a different area to
Right.
that development?
For that type of development style, which might, again, not be in the best, from a planning perspective. Again, we want to encourage density where there's infrastructure. I think we all are in agreement from a planning perspective. But in your more rural and environmentally sensitive areas, just allowing that density bonus to carry out through there might pose challenges moving forward. That's just
So
something
I
to
would
think about.
say a slight nuance to what Galen just said. I wouldn't say that we were in agreement to density in where we had sewer and stuff. We would agree for density growth if it was related to helping solve a crisis like affordable housing, but to just say density for density, I think that's where we're sort of not feeling the love with maybe the state legislator right now. I don't think we're able to drink from the same cup on that one. It just doesn't seem. So I would look at this, if 1826 stays on the books as is and the fix-it stuff doesn't help us either carve out that the density growth is specifically only if you come in with some portion of affordability housing, and then we're looking at, to Paul's point, we're looking at land value increases that will counter our affordability, kick that can way down the road, if not into another universe. And then I would say, then we would have to work quickly, before the July end thing and figure out ways to boundary conditions some of those areas that we're concerned with. So for example, Goose Rocks Beach is in the growth area because there's sewer. We definitely don't want, old houses that don't have good drainage getting torn down and having 4 units going up, and then have them all being rented. That doesn't seem to help us at all at many fronts. So I think those would be the things that we're going to look for your guidance on the fix-it. And then what your takeaways are from here, from us and any other residents that are here that want to speak. And then when you take that back to committee, what sort of nets out from that, and then guidance that you can, or input that you could give back to us would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, and just to respond to the Goose Rocks Beach question specifically, because Galen and I had talked about that, and that's something that I have already, reached out on, which is to say the concern of in areas where we have built water and sewer, really for water protection and resource protection reasons, rightly so. That seems very counterintuitive to then say that's also where development would occur. And I totally understand this, and I believe. And then thinking through, again, it's really in my mind, where I've got to get some of our technical experts in the room here, because it's really about shoreline zoning and how different that is from the floodplain and how the floodplain has changed. Because we're all going to be dealing with, how we think about the climate impacts with regard to where this is allowed. Hugely important question, and I just wanted to respond to that, Mary Beth, because that's really where there's already, some conversations happening. And then absolutely, let's stay tuned here, but I do think it's a really important time for all communities to be thinking about their comprehensive plan and their growth area and where intentionally they want to see growth. Because I'll just say it again, the only way you're going to see affordable and attainable middle-income housing growth is where you plan for it and where you encourage it to happen. Simply because the numbers are not going to pencil without that kind of a community effort. So I would just make sure that we're all clear on how that this is going to help, but there would be some more work, I think, that would need to be done to see it happen.
Here's where I fall off the cliff. So I appreciate that, and I think this has been a really good conversation, and thank you so much for listening, especially to all my comments. The committee's been a little quiet. But so now, going through all that, where I go like way over the cliff quickly and lose my head is on 1921. So that's where it sounds like we're talking through this, and you're hearing our concerns. You're going to go back to committee. Other reps are going to bring back their concerns, hopefully from their groups. We see activities from growth planning and boards around Maine where they're trying to counteract some of the adverse things that they see coming their way from some of these bills. So I would say maybe side effects that they're trying to counter. But then where I get really concerned is 1921, when we have this board that gets created at a state level that then becomes the overarching board that says, okay, well, you didn't follow, in essence, your planning board and your zoning board of appeal didn't really follow the spirit of the law. And so there's this 3-person panel that then can come in and sort of override our towns, is how I read it. And that's where I got great concern. I thought section 16, the first paragraph, the first sentence started off really great, which was the board may not reverse or modify a final decision of a municipality reviewing the authority except for errors of the law. And I'm like, yes, that's great, because that's very similar to our wharf and weir that we have on the select board, that the state can't overrule us unless we didn't follow process. So I'm thinking, okay. But then as you read down that paragraph, it gets quicksand on me. The reviewing authority, they're making judgments on the municipality based on reasonableness, reasonable and realistic. So there's a lot of really squishy language in paragraph 16, or section 16, paragraph 16, whatever you want to call it, that gives me pause. So everything we talked about like what we could do to our ordinances, what we could do to shore up to make sure that we try to provide affordability, and we try to preserve our environment and, you know, all shoreline and all that, could be somehow overridden by by a three-person panel because somebody appealed up to them, and then they fall back and say, no, you must follow this, you know, this 1829. It is so far removed from the planning board, the zoning board of appeals that sit within a community. I get, you know, very nervous. So I'm hoping I'm interpreting this wrong, but.
So just a little bit of the backstory. So 1921 is based on the Housing Appeals Board that has existed in New Hampshire for, I think, 7 years. And they have basically the process that is laid out here. The goal of, so, you know, when we think about how these processes work in municipalities, the municipality determines the comprehensive plan, the policies, and then the zoning, right, that applies. And then and then developers can come and propose things that align with that zoning, ideally. So this was created in New Hampshire primarily to respond to situations where there was a project that was proposed, it received preliminary approval, it aligned with the zoning, and then at the end, the planning board denied the project as one scenario. So that's one scenario where this could play out. That after, again, then going through the Board of Appeals, Zoning Board of Appeals, the idea would be that then you could appeal to this board just as you would appeal to Superior Court or to go to court, with the idea that this board does two things. One is make sure the process doesn't take 2-3 years, so everybody's getting an answer quickly about the correctness of the decision, and also that there's clarity around if your zoning says X and the developer does X, then the legal responsibility, as you all know, of the planning board is to approve that project. And there have been projects, not only in New England, but all over the country, where that is in fact the case, and the planning board denial didn't align with that, so that there was some other thing happening. I don't think, in our town, I think we have very capable staff, we have very robust committee participation, but there are situations where it's come up where the project aligned and followed all of the rules, but was still denied. Similarly, there are situations if an abutter, a project was approved, and this would also be available to abutters or to other interested parties to also appeal those decisions. The goal of this is to, really expedite the process and also make sure that no one can sort of run out the clock and kill projects. So a lot of good affordable housing projects have been really stymied because, there have been endless appeals that have then drawn it out 2, 3, 4 years. The financing falls apart, the project falls apart, doesn't happen. So the idea of this is to make this available to various parties, and also then to, I think what they've seen happen in New Hampshire, which is, I think, a very positive outcome. It makes sure that municipalities focus on aligning their zoning with their comp plan, and that making sure all the policies and everything lines up. There are a lot of places where, that's not always happening. And so I think, again, we're a very well-resourced, capable town. That idea of that disconnect not being there is key. But I think that's what they've seen happen in New Hampshire. It really incentivizes everyone to be clear in your ordinances so that then the projects that are being proposed actually align.
Are these 3 people on the panel essentially volunteers?
So they would be, and this is where we are, working on this bill tomorrow as well in committee. The idea is that they are experts in this field.
Anyway.
So yes, so you've got, the idea would be that they would be paid, there would be, we have other boards, like the Workers' Comp Board, for example, they have lawyers that specialize in this area, and we pay them to hear those cases as they come up. So, it might not hear a lot of cases, it might hear, in the beginning more, but they tend to, as they've seen in New Hampshire, it sort of declined over time. We are hearing tomorrow from the judicial branch, and also from some of the folks who've worked on this around the country where these are in place, to see, because a lot of times the judges in the Superior Court, et cetera, they don't know anything about land use law and how this all works. So the idea is if you have people who know how this part of the law works, then they're better able to adjudicate the cases and correctly. And, and then again, to any concerns, the idea is that the decisions are still appealable to the Supreme
Yeah, I
Judicial
was kind
Court
of
at this point.
surprised to see a surveyor as being an eligible person, and, I mean, would a computer science engineer be, it just says engineer, so there are, 15 kinds of engineers.
So being more specific in the qualifications of the.
I think so, if you were
okay.
picking them for their expertise. So are we talking, is this $1 million project between staff, these people getting paid, procedures being set up? What's like the annual freight on this?
Let's see, I'm not, off the top of my head, going to remember the fiscal note on this. That's one of the things we're going to be discussing tomorrow, which is the specific structure and potential costs of this, because that was raised by the judicial
And they would have
person who
staff,
came
I
testify.
assume?
Typically, in this kind of scenario, there would be like one staff person assigned to set up meetings, make sure everybody has the materials, set up the Zoom, et cetera, all that stuff.
So then the developer goes in, he files a brief or whatever you're going to call it. It's a quasi-judicial thing, and the town then has to file a brief with its arguments, I assume,
Yep.
telling why they decided what they decided. So that's additional cost, obviously, for the town and for the developer.
As it would be if you went to court, so same, yeah, the idea
I
is that
understand,
this
yeah,
would
you
be-
always judge that when you decide.
Sure.
If the developer loses, does the town get reimbursed? I can see under this kind of scenario that, I'm much more likely going to appeal if it's going to be shorter, so I'm going to go for everything I can try for, and, the reasonableness standard, which I was not familiar with, I never did civil litigation, it was only 51%, the preponderance of reasonableness or something like that. I was not familiar with that term, but these are difficult decisions many, many times that boards wrestle with, and for their reasonableness judgment just to be overturned by a 51% margin is not very much. It's not like, there's no benefit of the doubt given to the board that it might have acted reasonably. I looked up that standard, I was not familiar with it. So it seemed like a very, very easy, like if I was on a planning board, I'd be like, why am I going to serve on a planning board anymore? I'll go do something else useful with my time.
I've noted that down, and I think I'll make sure to ask that question. The folks that I've spoken with in New Hampshire did not find that to be the case, but, that, I hear what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, I
So
think
we'll raise that
in
question.
that one, I think that's where the language here is, so in listening to how you described it, having a subsection of a judicial area where it's people that are experienced in land use, and would bring that to the table, I could buy it. I hesitate with Paul's comments about cost, in terms of, that's always in the back of all our minds, or most of our minds. But, this to me is no different than, I would ask to look at the waif and wear for a select board. And what I mean by that is, the select board, when we had a waif and wear issue come before us, we basically serve as a judge panel for the state. We're the ruling body for that. We
Can you
make
just
it-
clarify? I'm not familiar with that term, waif?
Wharf and wear, the wharf and wear. So for somebody wants to put a dock in the water.
Wharf.
Wharf.
It's
Yeah,
a New York
sorry.
accent.
Yeah, New York accent, sorry. You want me to say radiator? I get nailed for that one, too.
And it's Wharf and where?
Yeah. So it's.
Wharf and Weir.
Weir.
Weir,
Thank you. Got
yes,
it.
you're welcome.
Got it. Thank
sorry.
you. I'm
I'll
sorry. I
help-
just wasn't.
I'll
things
translate.
weren't computing.
That's what I said. I don't know. That's what I've been saying.
We're both from Pennsylvania, maybe I'll just translate.
Okay.
If I break into Pittsburghese.
Yeah,
Galen
All right,
might-
so I think, so what happens on that one is the select board makes a ruling. They're basically, so I would say select board would be synonymous with the planning board or the zoning board of appeals in this land use case. And then, for example, then if it gets appealed, when it goes for the appeal process, the only lens they look at was the process followed? That's the only lens. There's no test of reasonableness language. There's no, anything like that. They don't get into the shorts of the decision of those boards. To Paul's point, because they are so far detached, and that's where I get concerned about is this board up at the state. If they're not looking at just the law functioning process, then I think we're broken, or we broke something that actually works really good in the state of Maine. So, I can get your point. If somebody's dragging their feet and they're not, going through the process, everything you said, but that would be put into that way. This language here is way too broad. And the way that we read it from the municipality is basically the state came in and created this panel. We may as well throw our ordinances away. All our volunteers on all our panels, you can go home, take up another hobby because this one's not going to give you any payback. So I think that's where we're looking for some support back from you and the other state reps to turn this into, if you do want to create a panel, just make it very lens-focused on procedural, not on content.
So that's specifically, are you speaking specifically about the reasonableness?
Yeah, I don't think, I think reasonableness is a word that is, has a very broad ranging lens. And I look at our, a lawyer that's on our committee who, can't define that. And then I've written a number of contracts over my lifetime, and that word has always scared me.
Mm-hmm. And so note taken on that, and we'll make sure to address that. And then thinking about specifically, again, the intent of this is to say, so to follow your analogy about was the process followed, that again, this is what your zoning ordinance says, and this is then what the developer is proposing. And the idea here is that when the developers propose something that it follows all of that and it still gets denied, those are the decisions that have been very problematic. So this would be a situation where you're trying to say that if your ordinances, as they are written and that are being followed, then by law, that the planning board must approve that. And that's really where, so I just want to make sure that I'm understanding, because that is the process as it stated in layman's language, obviously, but that's the process that planning boards are supposed to follow. And there's just been some cases where that hasn't happened, that all those things were done, and there were some issues. And again, on the other side as well. So again, this process would be available to.
Yeah,
John.
I mean,
But
I hear you.
I would just caution too, while we're doing all these changes, I would just caution from an implementation and a procedural point of view, that when we, start drinking from a fire hose, this is when things get missed, and then we could have some bad ramifications. And so this one, if you said, okay, this one, I think you should drag your feet on a little bit and really, really air it out, because if we're just following suit from another state versus trying to really solve problems here, there may be another path to the sea to solve this problem versus what New Hampshire did, because they only have a little part to get to the sea. We have a much longer coast. Did you like that one? Oh, that was good. That was good.
It would also seem, if the goal is, towns have not wanted affordable housing, they've zoned themselves so they can't have affordable housing, they just don't want that in their neighborhoods. And this is the remedy that's needed for that. Then it would seem that this remedy should be catered, put towards the affordable housing problem, not toward someone, a developer who wants to build a $3 million subdivision per house, and him having this opportunity, or her, to, roll the dice and see if he can, go against the planning board and prove that they didn't act reasonably.
And just to
and
make
those
sure,
are-
though, I just want to, I always am just cautious to make sure that we're saying the same thing. Again, this is not a law or an appeals board that is designed to say, here is your zoning, and someone wants to do something different, and therefore
No, I
you're going to be
understand that.
forced. Okay, I just want to make sure the way you said that.
No, I understand why
No,
people
so,
go
okay.
to court. They feel the planning board didn't follow the law, so they go file Superior Court. And, if it takes, I don't know how long it takes. If you say it takes 2 to 3 years, I believe you. And so a more expedited route might be, a good idea. But if the problem is there isn't enough affordable housing built, then make this panel deal with affordable housing appeals, as opposed to rich developers and rich people from Massachusetts or New Jersey or Pennsylvania who want to push the town, and, see if somebody will find the planning board's reasonableness a little different than theirs. On the conflicts of interest portion of this, I'm confused as to how that would work. So say the Chief Justice picks his law clerk from 20 years ago. He works at Verrill Dana in Portland, 90 lawyers in the firm, and he's the lawyer on the panel. Would Verrill Dana not be able to ever represent a client in front of this panel because their partner, their boss, their whatever is on the panel? Would that be a?
This is where I am not a conflict of interest expert, so
Well, the language is
I hear what you're saying.
very, squishy on that too. If you could do it, then every developer in town would run to Verrill Dana and hire them to represent them on these appeals, because their partner, maybe their lunch mate, is on this panel. And if the guy from Verrill Dana has to recuse himself, then you have 2 people. How does that work? How do you have 1-to-1? One guy says, I agree with the town. One guy says, I agree with the developer. What happens?
Town wins, right?
The town wins?
Yeah, so these are the things we'll be talking about tomorrow. So yes, I mean, these are excellent questions, I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I think this is a, just as a resident's point of view, I get concerned about a panel like this that's not really defined. We do have a process. It just seems like if you say it takes too long in the courts, maybe there's a, expedited process that can happen within the court system that exists today instead of creating a different panel. Just
And
a
some other
thought.
states have, and again, just to speak a little bit off the cuff here, one of the things that we do in introducing legislation is to really, this is how, you guys know this is how the conversation gets started. So this is one bill that we had one public hearing on. We're going to have a work session. There are some states that do like a special real estate docket, and so that's another way to do it in the courts. So a lot of this, again, is going to come up tomorrow, so appreciate the feedback on this one, and I think we'll be getting into that as well.
Okay.
I had one more, and then I see an audience member. And I have chatted with you about this in the past, but I grew up in a town in New Jersey that a river went behind my house, headed out to the bay, often 20 miles from us. The town was there 300 years, 1620 or something. Never a flood, never a flood. And then the 50s happened, the 60s happened, the 70s happened, and everything was developed west of us, up the hill from us. The density, just got overwhelming. And then guess what happened? Our town at the bottom of the hill, much like Goose Rock's Beach at the mouth of all these little streams that trickle through town, flooded. When I was in high school, we used to row to people's houses and take them out of their second floor bedroom windows. The property values crashed. The town, the county, the state spent millions. It's unrepairable. It's unrepairable. In the storms 2 years ago, in January, it wasn't the oceanfront houses at Goose Rocks that were in trouble. It was everything in the back, because the more intense storms, all the water heads to the coast, the tide comes in, gets locked in there. All those housing values have, crashed. 20-30% of the people who flooded, they're all like, what am I going to do with my house? Am I going to raise it? Can I afford to raise it? So the higher the density in the rest of the town, that water is going someplace. I mean, we're working with drainage, but how do you put these large structures on 5,000 square feet and expect the water to do anything other than, head off the property? In the towns around where I grew up, now you have to keep all the water on your site. If you build an addition to your house, you put a family room on, all that water, it's calculated, it has to stay. If you have to dig a big, sink in your backyard, that's what you have to do now, because it's just become, horrible. So everybody communally suffers from what happened, because there was no regional planning. Every town did what they wanted to do, and yet, a lot of victims. So that's my concern with this town. If you look at the overlay, the water in this town, it's just, a million streams that all head towards a few exits, and, it's nobody's fault, but it doesn't wreak out for, more dense population, more dense planning. Just is not suited. And a lot of those people aren't in shoreland zone, they're far from it, but their water goes.
Yeah, you can see it on the flood maps we showed a couple of weekends or meetings ago, which actually might take into consideration LD 1572, which was
I can remember the
had
number.
to do with sea level rise and the state having to different departments within the state to take in consideration what the sea level rise will be at 2050 and 2100. And that may be helpful for also defining what the future floodplains might be versus today.
And I'm looking at Galen, because that's really where I'm curious as to the most recently updated floodplain maps and how those apply when we're looking at DEP and other regulatory. Is there have we said, now we're at the most recent one that applies when you're looking at these questions?
Yeah, so we did have a modification of our floodplain management ordinance, and so we will follow the most recent updated one that was federally approved. And certainly, I think the Growth Planning Committee has been, since the storms of 2024, they definitely have been we've been having this conversation for the past 2 years about stormwater management. And so we are not an MS4 community, but we definitely understand that we need to be more proactive in our planning efforts. So that is actually something that's on our agenda for later tonight, to have those conversations on how we're going to control stormwater for new development moving forward.
And having done Galen and Nadia's amazing Lego game and learned about rain gardens and a lot of good stuff there. So I think that's a really important piece of this as well.
So before
point
we
taken.
open it up to the people here, just one more thing on 1921, the three-person panel. Section 7, and this is the concern too, if you can review that in your committee. the duties, this board has the power and authority to and shall hear and affirm, reverse, or modify. And so it has a lot, and that's where the scope of this is very concerning. So for example, you know, decisions on subdivisions or site plans, you know, decisions on variances, special exceptions, the use of innovation, land
Innovative.
use controls, growth management, and then, you know, decisions on historical district commissions, heritage commissions, conservation commissions. So you know, decisions of other municipal permits, fees, you know. So it basically, when we read this, it's like we said before, you know, if you could, you know, talk to your committee and say how your town is feeling, your growth planning committee, we feel that we should just let all our boards go home. Because that section 7 is, it basically they can step in. So that doesn't, the language here doesn't reflect, I think, your intent of what you thought you know, your intentions. Again, we go back to intentions and language. The intentions that you spoke about, this bill seems to, you know, step way out of those boundaries, and it's concerning.
And I hear you, just to be clear, the appeals board, and I understand what you're saying, but the appeals board would also find in favor of the municipality. I mean, there's not a guarantee that you're going to bring your appeal to this board and they're going to find in favor of the plaintiff. There's a process that they need to go through. I just want to make sure, because I hear what you're saying.
No.
It's not that they're going to overturn everything
No,
just
but
because they
I
exist.
think,
so.
you know, we're trying to, again, this is, you know, if it's to expedite and to not have certain boards stymie, you know, for no reason, no good reason, I think, from my opinion, I would ask the legislative to look and see if there's another path to the sea versus having another 3-person panel. If the answer is a 3-person panel, I think the language has to be very clear, and I would ask, given that we're municipalities with limited funding, I would ask if something like a 3-person panel did go forward, that language would be put in that Paul recommended, which is if this person that was suing the town lost, that they would pay our legal fees. We are up against, in our specific community, we're up against developers that are extremely wise and well-versed in ordinances and land use, and can inundate us quickly, and have access to lawyers that are way above and beyond sometimes our own capabilities. So I just want, you know, those are real things that we run up against in our town, and I just make sure that that's being considered.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it would seem like the housing panel of experts should have the same authority the court has, and should not be given a whole bunch of other toys to play with that, you know, the courts have not routinely been in the business of ruling and overruling planning boards. This one that the growth, they would have the power to deal with an appeal concerning growth management controls and interim growth management controls. What, you know, suppose we've asked for, I don't know why we haven't gotten it, but the sewer availability report. So let's say a year from now, a lot of development happens and our sewer capacity is, you know, there's 50 dwelling units that could hook up, because before you had one house here and all of a sudden you have 4. So there could be an acceleration of those permits. And we then say, oh my goodness, we really can't, we're not going to be able to put sewer in this entire growth area. We have to look at our growth area differently because we have no capacity. Would we be under this one? The planning board says, I mean, we either take something out of the growth area because it's too far from the sewer or too expensive. This kind of suggests that we lose the right to really control the growth area here, as long as we follow the rules.
So the way that this would work, as I understand it, is that if a project is proposed, at that point in time, there's a determination made as to whether there exists adequate water and sewer capacity to support that development. So it's a
Right.
project by, it's not saying, you know, anything can happen moving forward in time. It's that for that project, if the water and sewer capacity does not exist, then it doesn't get approved. So that's really where, as I understand how that process works, that would not change.
Except that, to me, we would be in the business if we changed our growth area because of an acceleration of permits 4 years from now, and we had to change our growth area because, we have to spend, Alan, or you, Maribeth, you might know the number, just to replace our existing pump stations. I saw 20 million in the budget, something like that. So, yeah, we have these known costs of replacing pipes and, you know, our pumping stations. So, you know, we as a community decide we can't even afford to do that. We're not certainly going to be extending sewer lines where we thought maybe we would, or maybe, you know, you're within, how many thousand feet from, what's the,
Well, the growth area is 1,000 feet,
1,000 feet? So maybe
within
we,
1,000 feet of the current infrastructure,
yeah.
excluding Goose Rocks, right? We kept them out.
I just missed that point. So now the current ordinance says,
The growth area is within 1,000 feet of the infrastructure, water and sewer. That's how we originally defined it. We excluded Goose Rocks for obvious reasons. We didn't want to have growth there because it's already had grown. So we left them in a transition zone.
so I guess I'm not understanding your question, Paul. I
Well,
apologize.
question, if the community made a decision that we, for the next 20 years, all our money is going into the infrastructure replacement and repair, and we're not extending anything, and therefore we're going to adjust our growth area, this particular item looks like our judgment on that might be called into question, and we could be overruled.
Again, in law, on a project-by-project basis, if a project is proposed that is in the growth area and you know, checks all those boxes, but there is not adequate water and sewer capacity for whatever reason, if you're
Yeah.
replacing, then that is, you know, that is in law a reason for not approving the project. So I guess I'm just trying to be really clear. That is
So your
how
thought
it
is
works,
they-
and
they
that
would-
this
they
doesn't
would-
change
Even
that,
if the developer tried to take that, they would rule in our favor because it's within the law.
because that's what the law says, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Did you want to open it to other?
Yeah, I just want to make sure there's no other questions here from the board. Any other questions from the board? Okay.
Anything else?
I guess the only thing I would say is about 7E for you, Tracy, just something to think about, is about the board can appeal decisions from a historic district commission. Kennebunkport does have 2 historic districts, and I know it's something that the Growth Planning Committee is interested in looking at historical design standards to protect our historical 2 areas of town that are such a treasure, and it brings a lot of people to this town, and we do appreciate the design elements. I have personally, and was gonna give an update tonight to the GPC, but I've been in discussions with a few local architects in town to come in to the Growth Planning Committee to do a workshop with them so that we get a better understanding of what architectural design elements we should be looking at in updating our design standards for those 2 areas of town. And so that's the area we're at right now, and then also down at Walker's Point, that is the other location of the other historic district, which was designated back in the 1970s. So I think there is a concern there to make sure that we are preserving the historical character of the community that we all love, and I just want to make sure that's something that's brought to your attention.
absolutely, and again, that the historic, the body of law that pertains to establishing and maintaining historic districts is not affected by this, so that is
But
in
that's where
response to your
Yeah,
question.
but that's where that section 7 is questioning to us then of why it exists. So that's when you go back to committee, if you can hash that out, and if this 3-person panel exists, we just you know,
Yep,
would
no,
like some
noted,
clarity.
yeah, I just want to, I was trying to make sure I
Yep.
understand the question, because again, this isn't designed to change that. If your concern is, would this panel be able to, if a developer appeals and say, I should be able to build that anyway, even though it doesn't, it's in the historic district and it doesn't match your design standards, the answer would be no, because that is what the law says. So that's really where I hear the concern, but I just want to make sure that the law as written and as we would, you know, be focused on implementing it, would be to continue to support and maintain what is in law. And that's really important and very important because of, you know, our shared treasuring of the historic parts of our town and of our state that are so important to everybody. So absolutely, that's key.
Yeah, so if we all disappeared tomorrow and somebody had this was law, then it should be able to stand and, you know, somebody should be able to pick it up and say, okay, we can't touch historical districts. And that's why number 7 has to change. That's all we're saying.
But I'm sorry, I just want to make sure we're clear, okay? And I'm not, because the issue would come up that could be something like this, that if in fact you had a historic district that had design standards and a developer proposed something that met those design standards, and then at somewhere down the process, that was denied, that's where you have conflicts that could be addressed by this board that is expert in these kinds of cases. So the idea isn't to give people power to overturn your historic district standards. I just need to say this very clearly. That is not what this is designed to do.
But-
It is designed to make sure that that there is a process. So say the opposite happened. Say there was historic standards and you said these kinds of things must be painted this shade of tan. And then someone proposed this shade of tan, and then the planning board voted. I'm not saying you would, but the planning board voted and said, no, we want it this shade of gray, and therefore we're denying your application. It's those sorts of things that this is designed to address, not to allow any overturning of
And I think that's
the design
just
standards.
then the
So-
intro into 7 has to be the duties of 7. If you can just take a look at the language of 7.
And what part of the language, though, there?
It sort of gives you the perception that the duties of this board, like you had to put a lot of words to clarify for us that this board wasn't going to be able to come in. The powers and duties under this subsection include but are not limited to appeals concerning. So it doesn't, it
But-
just has to be clarified in the beginning somewhere, I would say, because it's not clear. If it says that it can reverse or modify in whole or part appeals. So it just has to, again.
So it's really the ability,
it
so
has
this
to-
is
if-
helping.
if it's
So you're saying the
stuff you-
ability to change or modify, okay.
Yeah, you can't change or modify the ordinances of the town. You can address an appeal that, again, it goes back to if somebody didn't follow the ordinances of the law, that's what this lawsuit should be against, not against the ordinances and the law.
Thanks for that clarification, that's helpful. Yeah, appreciate it.
But I think, I mean, it's a question really for Galen. If the design standards for historic district were black and white, you would not need a committee to look at an application. There's a lot of gray. Someone comes in with something, and you have your design standards, and the question is, does it meet the design standards or not? And the board makes a judgment. They're all people with their own biases and, aesthetic tastes. And, you might have a 3-2 vote on a committee, because it's not just, something gets turned down because they feel this brand new, now I can put 8 units in this 2 lots I bought in downtown, and put them together, and I'm going to put a mansard roof on it, and I'm going to put these nice windows in which meet the design standard. But clearly, most people would say this doesn't fit here. But under this language, they could say you didn't act reasonably. It met the design standards, and in our judgment, 2 to 1 vote, it met the design standards. So it's not black and white, and it's not you know, it's just human, those humans are gonna make a judgment based upon their own beliefs.
But
and-
that's exactly what a planning board is not allowed to do. A planning board must follow the law and the design standards as they're written in the ordinances and cannot use their own bias or their own personal opinion
Well, let
about
me ask,
something. So
let me
that's
ask the
really
question
where
to Galen.
I
Is
just
there,
want to make sure that we're clear.
let me ask the question,
not.
is there gray area?
So to answer both your questions, yes, they do have to follow the letter of the law and the design standards of what is in their ordinance, but there is a lot of gray area in town planning and planning board review. There are times where the developer will propose modification of your standards because they think that's unreasonable for them. And so there's times where the planning board will deny those modification requirements. So if that were, and then they would deny the application because it's not meeting
So
that
if,
standard.
let me just run through this and make
Yeah.
sure I understand. So if development is proposed, here are the design standards, here's our initial draft of what we propose to meet the design standards. You sit down with the town planner, and that gets approved, so that gets preliminary approval. Sit down with the town planner with some concerns, make some adjustments. In that case, the adjustments would be in order to meet the design standards that are in ordinance in the community. Would that be correct?
Correct. Well, sometimes, again, the developer will propose modifications to those standards because of something with the terrain, or they think it's economically something that's not feasible for their project to make it worthwhile. And there are times, again, I think our planning board has been very good working with developers and understanding that there are some development constraints on a site. And we work with the developer, but there might be times where that is not the case, where there's a difference in perception of what is on the site at present or the concerns of the community. And that is where, that is the reasonableness factor. I think that gray area, that'd be in front of the board.
And at that point, those changes are made at the discretion of the planner, but without the planning board approval.
No,
Is
the
that
planning
correct?
board, we always just offer advice to people. They can always come to us and ask for advice. And we always say caveat, you know, we are giving the best advice we can, but we do not know how the planning board's going to feel about your proposal. Because the planning board is the ultimate arbitrator of the development project. They're the quasi-judicial official that oversees the site. We only are support staff. We
But
provide.
again, I just want
Yeah.
to ask the question there. It's not how they feel about it, it's if the project meets
No, but I
the
think-
requirements in the
It's not black
ordinance.
and white.
But,
Well, I just
but-
want to make sure,
yeah,
though,
but I
that
think
there
this
are
is
things
right.
that changes, well, let me just ask my question. There are changes that the planner could suggest, that the developer might suggest, to say, in order to address the needs of this site, I want to do this. And you could say, well, that doesn't really meet the ordinance, you can try it. Right, that, again, I just want to make sure, it's not how they feel about it, you could try it, but it doesn't really meet the letter of the ordinance. I just want to make sure it's not a feeling, it is a, does it address and is it in line with the ordinance as written in the community?
so it's not a
Correct.
feeling, it's an interpretation. And so, for example, if we go back to, say the word for me again, Where?
Which one?
Wharf
Wharf and Weir?
Yeah, so if we go back to that example, it was a 3-2 board.
What was the issue?
The person that came before the board, the result was 3-2. And that,
And what was the topic? What was the
that was the
matter that you-
Wafen, say it again.
We're back
It was
to
the Wharf and
docks.
Weir, it was to allow a
Right,
fish
but it
house
was
to
a
have
fish house, right? So it was something, my point is, there's things on the books. We had our lawyer here at the meeting, and the guidance from the lawyer was basically reading definitions to us. And even with black and white words, definitions, words that mean the same thing, or mean one thing, are interpreted different. And there is no law, that's why we have courts, because there is no black and white, and that's what the planning board does, that's what the zoning board of appeals does, that's what the select board does when we get into these situations. And then it went to when the appellate process for that one was basically, it didn't go back and adjudicate the decision of the select board, the 3-2 vote, it just went back to see if we followed the process. And if that's what this board is trying to do, it should be as simple as that. Was the process followed? If this three-body board that is so far removed from our town, our land use ordinances, the look and feel of our town, why we make decisions, if they are so far away from our voter base, they can do damage to us with these cases, because if they don't take into account what the planning board has done, if the planning board literally did to you what you said, which was delay and a delay for no reason, then yes, there's something there. But if the planning board made a decision and interpretation of that decision, which is their right to do, that has to hold.
So, but can I just ask you, again, I'm just not understanding, so this is on me. When you say followed the process, you mean follow the process of the planning board and follow the ordinance?
Yeah, follow the
Right.
law. Yeah.
Follow
By
the
the
law.
law.
So again, it's the same. It's not, when you say process, I just say the ordinance. So
But
that's
they're
really the
not
following the
interpretation.
ordinance.
What we're trying to get across is this board has to stop if they start interpreting our ordinances and saying, is that gray or black? You know, if it's a tan or a gray, you know, that's interpretation of the ordinance. That three-person board shouldn't do that. They should say, did they look at you per the ordinances? There's color in the ordinance. They looked at the color. Yes, they did that. That's where it stops. They don't get to interpret it. Soon as they take that next step level, then start interpreting, you just wiped out our planning board, our zoning board of appeal, and that whole process. And that's the point. I think that's the salient point that we're trying to get across. And that's where our concern is. And that's item 7, where we see all those list of items that, to Paul's point, to Galen's point, to other people's point, that they can come back and relook at. We see that they're basically getting into our planning board shorts. And it doesn't, the language.
I gotcha.
doesn't
No, I
feel
understood. That was
good.
helpful. No, that was really helpful clarification, so thanks for that. Appreciate it.
I say it's no different than an OSHA regulation or EPA regulation, and they come out with their interpretations of what the regulation means. I mean, I spend a lot of time in my day looking at those things, so unfortunately, we're all human. We never are able to convey exactly how LD 1829 you see it and how I see it based on how I read it, right? So, all set?
Yep.
Yeah, we've got very limited time, but
Thank
Thank
you
you
all. Really
very much.
appreciate it. This was
Were
really
there any
helpful
questions?
discussion.
we got a couple questions. Robin, raise your hand first, sir. Sorry.
I appreciate all your attention to this detail, because it's very important to our
Robin,
town.
could you state your name
Oh,
for the record? We have someone
Robin
takes
Phillips.
minutes somewhere else. Yep.
Kennebunkport. So do we have 7 people, participants? Is that what that little 2 people are on Zoom?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, never seen
It seems as though, I mean, I've watched a little bit of the planning, growth planning, but to a person that has no idea what this bill is, when you read something, and I would just like, Galen, if you could clarify, because you wrote this in one of the documents you sent out. So the potential under 1829 is 14,400 something units. Is that correct?
That is a rough estimate based off of just the parcel sizes we have in Kennebunkport. It does not include any development constraints for the town.
Okay, so that's a lot. I haven't heard anything that the average person who lives here could understand. I mean, we can understand it, but the nuts and bolts that's a lot of people. And in the bill, it said the shoreline, it seems to, Tracy seemed to imply that shoreline zone was, exempt from this, but isn't in the actual bill, and maybe it's been changed since I read it, there could be increased density? Is that true?
No, shoreline zoning would still apply to.
All the
to
way?
Shoreline, yeah, so the
All the
shoreline
way.
zoning lot standards would
Okay.
still apply.
Okay, so and also with this bill, there are no caps. What is our current cap on new residences right now?
So I believe you're referring to with LD 1829, they say there's no caps for the growth area of your town. You would still have growth caps from transitional and rural areas, if I'm correct, Tracy, on that. I think that's been my interpretation. So the only cap that would be lifted would be the 20. So for the town of Kennebunkport, we have 40 growth permits. 50% are in the growth area, followed by 30% and 20% respectively in transitional and rural.
So for people who live out in other areas, say people who have family land and want to pass it down, it's capped at 20, no matter if you've lived there 200 years and you want to give it to your child. But in the growth area, there can be
Unlimited.
Yep.
14,000.
It can be whatever the
Yeah.
amount is, yep.
Yeah.
It's based off our sewer capacity at that point.
Okay, and that's the other thing. In the bill, I thought I saw where the growth area and the area we're talking about had to be serviced by, that's the implication I got if I were watching this meeting. But in the bill, it said, or applicable situation. So like a fourplex or a 20plex, they could have sewer and wells out in the rural area, right? They could have septic, I mean.
Septic, yep.
So they could have private septic. So it's not really just the growth area or places served by sewer. If you can pass a perk for a fourplex, you could have it, right?
So my understanding from your question is, if someone can put a septic tank on a lot, can they do 4 units in the growth area? My response.
Not the growth area,
Outside?
outside.
No. So outside the growth area, you would still have to follow the 20,000 square foot requirement. That's my understanding, for your septic, if you have a septic tank. But not it's in your transitional area, but outside in your rural area, we would still have a 3-acre minimum, because that's not the intent of the legislative change.
Okay, it is a little confusing when you
Yeah.
read, and I'm not a lawyer, so.
Yeah.
So that, I guess, is good news for the country. But to put that density in our growth area really seems quite extreme to me. And I would imagine, I've contacted several people and sent them the information, and people are really shocked. So I don't think people know, do we have to vote this bill in our town, or is it's just law now?
So we would have to adopt the ordinance, and that would be at a town meeting
Yeah.
to approve that ordinance change.
And if we don't, what happens?
I believe that's what's open is, I guess it would be facing legal challenges if we do not comply with the ordinance.
Are other towns considering such action? Do you know?
Most
What-
town planners that I've been dealing with in the state of Maine, they have been doing a wait-and-see approach to see what the fix-it bill is going to do for 1829
Yep.
before they decide to adopt. I would hope that the legislature would, if they do have a fix-it bill that's going to offer more clarity, I would hope they would do a similar practice as LD 2003 and giving towns a little bit more time to implement those changes, especially since we have to now educate our residents on what these changes are going to be. For the clarifying language, but that's my hope moving forward. But yeah.
So really, the only way to reject this would be if it were repealed at the state level and the governor. Is that how that would go?
Yep.
That's the only, we have no power
It's
here.
state law.
Right,
Right.
right. Okay, well, it seems rather extreme, but, I just wanted a few things clarified. I think 14,000 is a lot.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
for everyone that's here tonight, I am planning on doing a presentation to the select board this upcoming Thursday, so mark your calendars at 6 o'clock, to give a based overview for the select board as well as the general public on the difference between growth areas and zoning, and a little bit about the legislative changes that are coming down the pike as well. Because I think it's important for all of our stakeholders to know what's happening in our community and the potential changes we're going to have, just to get a baseline knowledge moving forward.
So really, it's the people in the growth area that are most at risk for losing their space.
Yeah, I think that was the intent of the legislature in doing
Yeah.
this. They really wanted to address single-family exclusionary zoning in growth areas where you have the infrastructure to have smaller lot sizes.
And what you heard from the committee tonight, Robin, and what we've talked about in previous meetings is when we play it forward. So, when Representative Guerra was talking about the intent, you heard Dan talk about the words versus the intention. So we've been playing it forward of what it would mean to our community as a whole. Paul brought up, price increases, blah, blah, blah. So, it's how we've been interpreting it. And I think what we heard from Representative Gear tonight, and then what we wait to see from the Fix-It bill, we'll be able to figure out what we need to do, if anything, like other towns are starting to do, that we're watching to see what they're doing also, and how they're trying to make some changes to their ordinances and comp plans.
Yeah, so get ahead of it so to speak. All right, well, I appreciate, you really paying attention to this, because it is important, and good luck.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Galen, quick question. Oh, sorry. There were regs that were proposed, and there was a comment period in November, October. Did they get adopted? I don't know how that works.
I know that the comment period expired. I don't know if they were actually adopted fully yet. I haven't
Do you know,
looked at the
Trace?
MOCA rules.
I know that the comment period had ended, and I'm just not sure whether the final rules
Okay.
have come out yet. And actually, if I could, I just wanted to clarify, because whenever I hear a numbers thrown around without context, I just want to make sure you said 14,400 units. What is that?
That was potential units, and that was based off the four on a lot plus an ADU that's allowed on the site. So that's the max potential within the growth area of town.
In the growth area,
Yeah.
and that's without considering water and sewer capacity?
That's not including water and sewer capacity. It's not considered development constraints such as wetlands, utility easements, private restrictions, nothing to that extent.
I would, yes, so I appreciate that. I would
Yeah.
just caution, because when people hear numbers like
Yeah,
that, and
yeah.
I go, wait a minute, because I think there are a lot of other things that would go to affect that number, setbacks, et cetera. I mean, there's
Yep.
a
Oh,
whole.
yeah, there's a lot of, yeah.
There's a lot of stuff.
Lot
So I
coverage, yeah.
I hear what you're saying, and
Yeah.
I know the idea of like, well, let's estimate, but if there is a way to get that to a more realistic number based on those other issues, that might be very helpful
Yeah.
as well.
I think
would-
what
I'd
it
love to
does
hear
do,
about
though,
that.
is it does give us into the thousands, so we're not talking about hundreds of units, we're talking about thousands. So it does give us, I agree with your comment, but I think there is a magnitude that we've understood. It may not be 14,000, but it's definitely going to be in the thousands, it's not going to be 100 or 150.
And
which
again,
is
that
huge
would
to
be
our
if
town.
every lot that had the potential to do it did it. Again,
Right.
I'm just going to be, again, very,
Oh, no,
I'm
no.
taken on my red
Yep,
cap, I'm a resident.
yep,
Nobody
yep.
I know is going to all of a sudden take their house and sell it and, and tear it down and build like, everybody won't do that. I just want to make sure. There's we live here. I'm not going to tear down my house and
Well, they-
put up a quadplex tomorrow. I mean, there's just,
We're also an older town, and they could do that and say, see you guys, thank you very much, I'm cashing out, I'm gonna move to North Carolina. I mean, I've heard people say that, not necessarily in this town. but
Boston
in
didn't
different
always
towns.
look like Boston.
So that can happen. I would suspect the number is whatever we have left in availability in the sewer plant,
yeah, I mean, I think that the constraining factor is that, but
whatever that number is.
I just want to make sure that
we
we're
can't
being
control-
realistic about, we have, what is the resident right now, 3,800? What is our total?
Yeah, around there.
True.
3,700, so, we're not going to turn around and move out and sell our places and build 4 units. I
But
just
that-
want,
but I
We
think
can fill the
what-
capacity in the sewer plant
Yeah.
quicker than we expect, and we can't control where that growth goes.
But the problem here isn't really the
That's the problem.
residents. It is, it's, so aging population, yeah, they're gonna probably cash out and say, congratulations, kids, you got a landfall, and we're headed out.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah, it's who
to
buys it.
almost half of our population that are non-residents. And this is a value play, this is a numbers game, it's a dollars game. And so this is a huge incentive to the people that don't have a stake in our town, don't consider this their home, and are using it for basically a cash cow, cash value, rentals, whatever, and now they can cash out at a 4 time.
Especially if you're a business.
And if you're a business here in town that owns houses, there you go.
I have a question.
But, yep.
Alan?
Are setbacks held to with regards to the language from the state, or are they modifiable by the state law?
So my understanding is, as long as we are treating all developments the same, all housing types the same with setback requirements, so we don't have different restrictions, like multifamily doesn't have greater setback requirements than a single family. As long as we're treating everyone the same, they're not going to appeal or overturn or change anything. We have to just treat everyone the same, and I think that's the intent of the legislature. Yeah. And Paul, did you have?
No, Alan wanted to
Nope.
speak.
Okay.
Anybody else out there?
Yep. Alan.
Okay, go for it.
Alan Daggett, Kennebunkport. I just want to bring up a couple of issues, a couple of questions. Well, not questions, points, actually. Brings back memories to our issue the RSU days. And, you know, it was a mandate. They said, we're gonna save you some money. Well, or we were gonna fine you if you didn't join. Well, no, they never, by the way, they never did fine anybody. But after a year or two, all of a sudden, we're $20 million in debt. And now we have a $44,000 per student cost to go to school. And this is going to take us the same spot. It's going to be too much, too soon, too quick, and you're going to end up having more police, more fire. I don't know what we're going to do about the sewer, water, public works, roads, and everything else. It's going to be a disaster, and it's going to cost us a lot of money, and we don't have it. And we can't, I mean, the next thing you're going to say is, well, geez, we're going to have to bond some money because we got to do all these things. I don't want to do it. I think it's too much. And you look at this town 5 to 10 years from now, it'll never look the same as it does today. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you, Alan. Anyone else? Okay, I'm
Is there anybody on that? Mike, has anybody got their hand up?
Yeah, at least I can, but give me a minute. Usually Dave would do this, I'm gonna double.
Did you get your answer? You got your answer.
All right, so it's, 5-acre farm, hold on.
Hi, this is Melinda Anderson, 5 Acre Farm, Kennebunkport resident for a long, long time. And if I could clap my hands to what Alan just said, I mean, I would clap my hands. That was spot on. And I feel as though the Growth Planning Committee, I so appreciate your pushback because you guys see what we as locals see and the problem at hand. This is kind of smoke and mirrors. It's not going to set up for the affordable. Already, Heritage Housing is taking advantage, which, you know, I can see how it's an opportunity for those that couldn't afford to pay their taxes to have land given to them so they can live here. But the locals want to live here and stay here, and this plan would totally make us sink. So I appreciate all the pushback, and I think, Tracy, I hope you take, you know, from this meeting, true information back to legislature to try and repeal it, change it, make it more concise so our boards can really do their work and save our town to be what it should be, and it shouldn't be developed and just sold out to the highest bidder. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that the last one? Yeah. All right, well, seeing that there's no more hands raised, I recommend that we end the meeting, not go on to the next agenda item. Pass your time.
Just homework for you all. First of all,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Representative Gear, for taking the time to be at the podium, to share your perspective on the bills, as well as receive a lot of the constructive feedback to take back to Augusta. We truly appreciate it. I think this dialogue is important for us as a community, and certainly, you know, I think this board's always open to having those types of dialogue and discussions with you on any kind of legislative opportunities that you see that might be of interest for the town.
I'm still up on the screen. Is this? Okay.
We can hear you, Melinda.
So,
I can see you, but my hand is down.
Mike has you on still.
I'm not sure. I could be saying more. I'll keep it quiet.
So only other homework assignment, because I know you're all having a meeting on the 16th. That's next Tuesday. That is your normally scheduled meeting because we had a snow day, and that's why this was rescheduled to today. So next week, you're going to be having a discussion with the Public Works and Wastewater Director And I did add to the SharePoint drive, because it is such a large file, I can't email it to you all, the 2019 wastewater capacity report that was done by Wright Pierce. And so that is available online for you all to review. And certainly, Eric will be here next week to have that conversation with you all.
Perfect, thank you for that.
Yep.
That'd be great. Excellent. Oh, we got homework, yay! And we had a snow day, wasn't that cool?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All right, before we adjourn, I'd also like to thank you, Representative Buer, for showing up and talking with us about this.
Yep.
And
Appreciate
it's
it.
always open, and if you hear something in the legislation, you want to come here and bounce it off us, we'd be happy to give you our feedback. As you see, we're not shy. And thank you all for coming today.
Yeah.
It's nice seeing faces
It's
out here
nice to
instead
have,
of a blue wall,
People.
so. All right, I'll take a vote on the motion to adjourn. All in favor?
All right.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you. Ooh.